Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, the money's a few minutes late, but you want to sit there?
No worries. Where you sit is very important.
Yeah, there's red velvet there, or there's chocolate down there.
It's a big choice. Chocolate, red velvet. Red velvet wins. The name tag is not there, so I'm going with the red velvet.
There you go.
Good to see you.
Go ahead. Good to see you as well.
What's up, Daddy? What's good, man? All right, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Just leaving meeting, so on time. I tried my best. I said I might be 2 minutes late. I'm gonna get there. Let's do it. Thank you. What we got? Celebration? Oh, that's thoughtful. Thanks.
I don't know the chart. Well, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and hopefully our last member will come in shortly. Citizens communication. Don't know that we have any citizens present. So the next item is approval of the minutes. And you should have a copy in the packet that you've been provided.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of June 5th, 2024.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
None. All ayes, none.
There we go.
So today, the only item on our agenda is to talk about the fiscal 25 proposed budget. So we do have a presentation I'll go through. But at any point, feel free to ask questions, and we'll definitely have time at the end to ask more questions. Hopefully you were able to review the proposed budget. It's been out on the website since the 14th, and it was emailed to each of the members of the Finance and Budget Committee on August 1st. All right, so the budget process starts with the guiding principles that's established by the council's strategic goals of safety, economic development, infrastructure, parks, programs, and services. And the city does seek community input all along the way. With anytime there's master plans that are being reviewed, there's always an outreach for community input. But specifically to the budget process, Communications has posted for citizens input and provided the city secretary's email. As far as we know, we have not received any responses. There will be 2 public hearings during this budget process, and we'll go over those dates later on in the presentation. So just to review the tax rate definitions, understanding how the tax rate is broken out and how it's calculated. City's tax rate has 2 components, the maintenance and operations and the interest in seeking. The maintenance and operations is the general fund, so that's the property tax that you're going to see funding general operations, and the INS is going to be our debt rate. The no new revenue rate is the tax rate required to produce the same amount of tax revenue for the current year as the previous based on the same properties. And so the voter approval rate is the maximum rate allowed by law without voter approval via mandatory election. The calculation includes specified increase on the prior year M&O, no new revenue rate, plus the amount necessary to cover debt service. And so both of these rates have been calculated by the Travis County Truth and Taxation Department, and so we'll go over what those rates look like. This is just an illustration of how some of the calculations get done. We've gone over this in previous meetings, I know, but if you take the voter approval M&O rate plus the debt service rate, we're not using any unused increments, but if we were, we could add those in. That would get us to our voter approval tax rate. As far as the tax levy calculation, we would start with the tax rate times the net taxable appraised value divided by 100. That gets us our total tax levy. That levy is divided up between general fund and debt service fund. So these are property tax rates, last year's rates compared to this year's rates. So we'll start at the bottom of the fiscal 25. The no new revenue M&O rate is calculating at 24.45. The no new total tax rate is 52.59. The debt rate is 28.98. This is based on our debt payments, and that does include issuing an additional $83 million in 2025. And then the voter approval M&O tax rate is 25.30, which gives us a total voter approval tax rate of 54.28. The proposed budget that we will be talking about is based on the voter approval tax rate. So this is just a comparison between the no new revenue rate and the voter approval rate, what that would do to a tax levy total. So it doesn't change the interest in sinking because that debt rate stays the same no matter what. But there's about a $2 million difference between the no new revenue M&O rate and the voter approval M&O rate. So this slide is part of what is required in the public notice that will be going out in the paper, but it compares the average homestead value to each of the years and applying that proposed tax rate for each year. And so it's calculating an average increase of $143. It doesn't mean that everybody will see an increase. Some property values might have gone down. We did do a spot check audit, and there are some properties that went down, and then there's others that went up. So it doesn't mean there will be an increase. It just means on an average homestead, this is what you might be looking at.
It's when I was looking back at the sorry, I don't know what slide it was, but the property tax rate one where it has the no new revenue tax rate of 0.4310, and the one for 2025 is 0.525. Like, that's pretty substantial difference between the two.
Yes.
And on that last slide, the values haven't gone up very much.
I hope so.
Is that due mostly to, increase in the tax base generally, then, as opposed to the values going up? Because it doesn't appear like the values are going up considerably as it relates to what individuals might be paying on their house.
Right. So it has to do with a lot of things. So when you're doing the tax calculations, a lot of things get factored in. Some of the big things that we saw this year were there were properties that had suits. They were filing against the value that they were received, and so there were some lawsuits that were settled. So all of those settlements get factored into that comparison year over year, and so that had something to do with the calculation. The no new revenue rate as a whole is purely a mathematical. It's like they take the value at what it's being reported and divide it by what you received last year in levy. So right. It's only math, but that value can change depending on lawsuits, exemptions. We did see some change in exemptions as well from one year to the next. So all of those play into it. Right.
Yeah, I guess, but like if we're taking the 0.5259 as like that's the no new, like that's essentially to receive the same revenue as last, like as last year, that would tell me that there's like something going on with the values generally, or the values went like
There
almost
was
down.
a very significant amount of values in these lawsuits.
Okay, yeah,
So they swung the numbers pretty.
yeah, that's a lot. That's a big delta between the two.
Yeah,
Yeah, hundreds
Yeah.
of millions.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I think one was like it was like $1 billion that was settled, and so if we don't see those type of changes from one year to the next, then you may not see as big of a swing
Sure.
in that rate. But we actually did see
Yeah,
quite
that's
as
considerable.
significant changes in
Do y'all
those
track that,
valuations.
those types of numbers? Like from year to year, the variance in that?
We have all that information.
In terms of like what's protested, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, every year we're provided that information.
Is that continuing to go up?
So here's how much you're gonna decrease due to, either litigation or people protesting their values.
There was some big commercial properties that
Okay.
affected those numbers. Any other questions on the rate? I'll scoot back over to our. So this chart compares the tax rate with taxes paid on the average homestead. So it's really just a visual of the blue bars represent the homestead taxes paid, and the orange line represents the rates over time. And that you can see the rate was continually going down until fiscal 24. We saw a jump, and we know that we increased our debt rate that year to handle our debt obligations. If we look at fiscal 14 to current, the taxes paid has increased 1,000. If you look at the CPI index, or this has increased 1,000. If you look at the CPI index, it's about 1,200. So we're just trying to look at it over time and make some comparisons there. The next chart is the appraised taxable value as it compares between commercial and residential. So it's a nice visual of kind of the growth that we've seen in residential compared to commercial. I mean, obviously residential has had a steeper growth, but commercial it's growing. It's just growing at a more shallow rate.
Mind going back one?
Uh-huh.
I think part of the reason this slide is interesting to me is that you would expect to see this inverse correlation, right? As the values go up, the tax rate goes down, right?
Yeah.
What this does is it tells the story of major infrastructure investment.
Yeah.
That's what's spiking your tax rate, right? And so that line could look smooth over time, depending on how you invest in your infrastructure over time, how far it's spread out. For us, we've got a bunch of facilities all hitting at one time. And so that's why we kind of have that little jump at the end, right? So to me, it kind of tells a story of like, there's major investments going on right now with streets and facilities. We're kind of spread out in a bunch of different buildings right now. It's not a great way to do business. So we do need to invest in a new city hall. We do need to invest in a rec center. The current one that we have is, 23,000 square feet. You should have at least 1,000 square feet per, or a square foot per population. So the one that we're building now is going to be closer to 130,000 square feet. So that would serve our community up until about 130,000 people. And so those are both two really big investments, but also all the streets and public safety related to public works in that facility. And so a lot of investment in facilities so that we can begin to start scaling with our community. So to me, that's kind of what a lot of the story behind that.
I think it's a pretty easy story to tell. Those big investments are not lost on anybody that lives in the area. That you can see the water treatment center going up. You can see those, and then that type of thing. I think what some people might, myself included, maybe, of how long. I think one of the conversations we had a couple months back now is how long do those debt obligations go on for? Is it 8 to 10 years? And would we then see that rate potentially go down at that time? And also, as far as the values go, are we worried about values going down? I think what we were just talking about, some of the values are kind of, they went up last year or the year before. Are we going to see those plateau or potentially go down as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so the debt, the first part of that question is it's generally 30-year debt.
Okay.
We are seeing a more of a smoothing of that. Like we thought it was going to go like this. We're seeing that we're able to kind of smooth it out a little bit, so it's not as dramatic. In terms of property values, it's anybody's guess. I think over the long term, we're going to see steady growth in property values in the Austin MSA. Just everybody's coming here. There's no end in sight with all the development going on, the major employers that are going up around us. And also, investing in, like downtown East and those projects, like something that really gives us a sense of identity is good for property values too. There's the tax component, but you're also getting, your property is now worth more than it was. And so that equity is important too. So we're investing in the community. The citizens are investing with their tax dollars into the community to kind of create this sense of place. All the parks projects that we do in the facilities to kind of strengthen our identity in the region it's beneficial to everybody.
I think one of the questions I had was driving around the community. My wife and I were driving around this last weekend and not really having a firm understanding of where Pflugerville starts and ends. Is there a continued, I guess, need or continued actions to keep expanding, I guess, the taxable area as well? Because although values may be kind of plateauing a little bit, the tax base is probably definitely going to be continuing to grow. And I don't know if what that effort looks like as far as trying to bring in other areas to be taxable.
Yeah, it's another interesting question, and I could talk for hours on that about our state legislature kind of eroding local control and our ability to annex. I'd be happy to visit with you anytime about that. What I would add is about half of within city limits is ready to be developed. We're only halfway built out in city limits. I drive by cow pastures on the way to Stonehill from here, right? We still have a lot to build. So there's a lot of upside there still. But in the past, the ETJ, that was your ability to expand.
Yeah.
Recent legislature pretty much killed ETJs.
So this chart just gives you a little bit of a comparison of the rates going across communities, different communities. And we've reached out to these communities, and these are the rates that they are proposing. They are all going up to or very close to their voter approval rates. You also have to keep in mind that all of these communities are at different stages in growth and infrastructure needs. And so right now, we are in growth mode and we are in infrastructure, either new infrastructure or replacing infrastructure that we have. So just gives you an idea of comparison. So we'll jump into key budget assumptions. These just give you some ideas of some of the things that are included in the proposed budget. The fund balance target is 35%. We did use the voter approval tax rate when we developed the document, so that's the revenue you would see. We used a conservative sales tax projection at 5%. That's the trend that we're seeing right now. It's a little bit more than we've used in the past couple of budgets. And we also did we did a change in our cost allocation. Our water wastewater fund, our solid waste fund, they have shared services that general fund provides. And so for that cost allocation, before it was a revenue, in this budget we have flipped it and it is now a credit to expense. And it's the more accurate way of reflecting that cost allocation. On the expense side, there's no new personnel added. There's a 3% increase on base salaries. We originally built in a 15% increase in health insurance costs. That's what we were being informed, and we have since received word that we're only going to see a 5%. So we're making some adjustments in the final budget. Emergency medical services of 1.3 million. This is not an expense that the general fund has had in the past, so this is something new. Increased vehicle leases. We started a lease program a couple of years ago. So each year we're taking so many of our vehicles that needed to be replaced and we're putting those into the lease program. So that lease cost, that's an operating cost that will continue to grow until we get our entire fleet into the program. In fiscal 25, we added 24 leased vehicles. And then there's,
Can I jump in one more
yeah.
time? So when you think back to the slide where it showed the 2 million difference between the no new revenue rate and the voter approval rate, it's about $2 million, right? There's 1.3 for EMS, and then we made significant improvements to what we pay our police officers. So right off the bat, there's your delta.
Yeah.
So it's meaningful. That difference, it's a little less than a penny, but it helps kind of carry the day with some
Yeah.
of these kind of unforeseen expenses. So.
And then we know that our debt service, existing debt service is 36 million. We're adding an additional issuance in 2025 of 83 million. This comes straight from the 5-year capital improvement program plan. Some of the larger projects that would be part of that 83 million is the Public Works Complex, Pflugerville Parkway, FM 685 corridor improvements, and East Pecan Street.
I had a question on the no new personnel. Was that intentional, or were there postings that went unfilled, or both?
So this was the year of big structural changes within the budget. So providing bandwidth for EMS services was obviously a big rock that we needed to shift. Trying to stay competitive with salaries, particularly in our police department, was super important. But also the way that we are handling how we charge the city for its own use of water, wastewater. There's like 3 or 4 of these big structural changes we're making, and we wanted to try to tackle those this year, so we can kind of get some consistency moving forward. And we're doing okay on a staffing level. We could always use more, but we can make it another year without adding FTEs. We prioritize some of these bigger rocks first this year, and so we'll have to reevaluate that next year in terms of personnel.
So budgeted,
Oh, okay.
it just doesn't add any
No new
FTEs.
FTE.
Correct, yeah.
We do have openings though. PhillyvilleTX.gov/.
Shout out. This is just a very high-level glance of all of the funds in the proposed budget. This total is $857 million, so just a very high level, what is considered government, special revenue, enterprise, and capital projects. So when you're flipping through the budget, these are the high-level numbers.
I'll flip back through it, but the 2.9 million that's the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds, I'm assuming.
So that's using the rest of the funds that we have.
Okay. Is that going to be expended in?
That is yes.
Okay, because I know those
That's the plan.
they were needed to be obligated by the end of this year
have to
and need to
be
be expended by the
obligated.
end of 2026. So.
Yep.
Yeah, expended or encumbered. So like we'll have some that's under contract, for example.
Sure.
Yeah. The budget established, though, shows that fund would go to zero in fiscal 25.
Okay.
So that's the 2.9. So general fund, honing in on that particular fund, we are looking at a comparison. Some of the things I've already mentioned play into the fact that our total revenues are actually going down from our projection in fiscal 24 into our proposed fiscal 25. And some of those factors are the cost allocation. 3.6 million was coming in as revenue. We're now showing that as a credit and expense. We also had almost $1 million legal settlement in fiscal 24, which is obviously not a repeat. And we also brought in 1.5 million in Parkland dedicated funds to fund some Parkland improvements during fiscal 24. So that's your delta between your projected and your proposed. On the operating expenditure side, you're going to see $5 million going up. And these have to do with all of the things we've mentioned as far as the key assumptions are concerned. A lot of it pertains to personnel. And then capital outlay, we always take requests for capital outlay, the needs that we need to have, and we always look at our available fund balance for these one-time expenditures. So in fiscal 25, we do have $3.1 million that we are using fund balance to do these one-time costs. And there's a list of all of those capital outlays in the proposed budget. So the proposed general fund revenue on the property tax side, the taxable values increased by $693 million. This does not include the tax increment reinvestment zone. Just wanted to put that out there. So 66% of the new property value comes from new property valuation. So that kind of gets you some perspective there. Sales tax is at 968. It's increasing 968,000 by using that 5% over 24 projections. And then I've already talked about some of the changes and why other revenue would be going down. So general fund expenditure highlights, we've talked about some of these. We did implement market study adjustments during fiscal 24. Most of those adjustments were covered by salary savings, but that is not the case moving forward. And so this budget does reflect those adjustments. It also includes the health insurance costs, the annual COLA that will go into effect October 1st. So that's 5.1 million in increases all by itself. And then on the operating side, we've talked about all of these things. And capital outlay is decreasing year over year, but that's always going to go up and down depending on the needs and the available fund balance.
Still.
Yeah,
we
do.
got it too.
I mean, we can keep
Yeah,
going.
that's fine.
Peter might catch up with us.
Yeah. So the next slide is just a visual of our growth in sales tax. I mean, it's one of the larger revenue sources in the general fund. There was much steeper growth from fiscal 18 to fiscal 22, but then it's still growing. It's just not growing at the rate in which it was. So we keep all of this in mind when we do our projections. We don't want to over project on our year over year increases.
Is that 1% that goes to the city? I can't remember. Or is it 0.5% that goes to the city? I can't remember.
We get
Not to put any-
1.5.
1.5. Okay.
And a half of it goes to the Pflugerville Community Development Corporation. So the next section is our hotel occupancy tax budget. This is just giving you, we made a push in fiscal 24 for Explore Pflugerville, and so we're really starting to utilize these funds to improve tourism to our community. And so this budget, if you flip over to the next page, it includes public art, economic incentives, promotion and marketing, tourism training, tourism memberships, and we're also pushing out a program for our short-term rentals. We do recognize that we have a good amount of properties operating as short-term rentals, and so we're wanting to make sure that they're complying with the occupancy tax rules.
How many hotels do we have in Pflugerville now?
Hotels, maybe
Counting in my head.
2 or 3 or
Marriott. And then I think there's 3 in
More than
Stonehill.
3.
Yeah, I was gonna say 4 or 5.
yeah.
I thought it was 10. Wow.
We do have incentives on some of those. That's why you'll see that economic incentive. So that's a commitment that we've made to give back through this fund to incentivize.
So does that probably apply to the Marriott? Because that's out in
Marriott
that
was first.
Yeah.
About a convention center, and there was a deal made at the time that they get the first amount of sales tax to be collected, and then we get the rest. So now we're kind of getting to that point to where we're well above that threshold.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to see actually realizing some revenue that we can do some cool stuff with. So we're starting to see more of that.
And then the next section is our enterprise funds, water, wastewater fund being the largest. You'll see that revenue year over year, this is based on a very complicated rate model that we use, and we are looking at rate increases again October 1st. This is a multi-year plan of having to make these rate increases to fund the very large infrastructure projects that we have, to include the water wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant. Those are the largest two.
And you may not have touched on it this time, but maybe sometime in the past. That's a good leap, and at some point it'll level off. So the people of the city can kind of understand that
Right.
we're going through it now a little bit, but it's gonna not be so harsh.
Right. Once we've stepped out with the debt and we know exactly because a lot of these projects are just getting going. So we're continuing to look at the debt that's going to have to be sold, the growth that that growth can affect those rates in the future as well. Because if we see a more aggressive growth than what we've put in the model, then that's gonna help those rate increases in the near future. So, as you can see, operating expenditures really doesn't change a whole lot over from one year to the next, but the debt service goes up pretty significantly by over $7 million in 1 year. And then they also have some capital outlay, not as much as they had requested in 24, but they still have $1.1 million utilizing some of their available fund balance in that fund. The next page is the rate adjustments that we've talked about. These are based on just your standard usage for water and wastewater. So you'll see the notes about how many gallons these are being calculated with. But for the average resident, they might be looking at an $19 increase over the current rate monthly. Any questions about that?
I guess I had maybe a question, but more of a comment, I guess, is when these projects are fully, I guess, completed, is the operating expenditures to operate these new facilities going to then go up as well? So, like, to your point,
Sure.
there might be some softening of these expenses going down, but I don't know how much of it's actually going to be reflected in any decrease in.
So the rate model that we use is already projecting like additional staff that will need to be hired over the next several years to support the new plants. So it's already built into the model.
Sure.
So we're hopeful that, we've already put some of those expenditures in there when we're stepping out and saying these are the increases that we think we're going to have over the next 5 years. But we assess that model every year.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that, we've considered everything before we step out with rate increases.
Yeah, and we make an educated guess as well as we can on how many new connections that we'll have. But if there are more people that come in above, then it'll start to go like this. If there's less, it'll start to go like this. So we're trying to be conservative in that estimate and hope to get pleasantly surprised a little bit.
Yeah. And the next one is the water wastewater expenditure highlights. The personnel are a repeat of general fund discussions. The same changes apply to their personnel. Their operating really is not going up that much. It's really just the debt service that's increasing that amount. And $2 million less in capital outlay requests, but still lots of projects going on. The solid waste, I have the summary in here. It's really not changing very much, and there's not a proposed increase on that rate. We are receiving a slight increase from the third-party provider, but we feel like the fund is healthy enough that it can absorb that increase, so we're not pushing those increases out to the customer. And then just looking ahead on the budget timeline, August 27th, there will be a public hearing on the budget. And then in September, on the 24th, there will be a public hearing on the tax rate. And at that time, the ordinance for the budget and the tax rate will be first and final reading on that. those are all the slides that I had for y'all. Any other general questions that you have? Anything you saw in the proposed budget that you want to flush out a little bit, or?
I think, well, I don't know what number this is, but the one that had the Round Rock, Cedar Park, like, this is kind of one part of the equation. Like, I don't have a full appreciation for, like, Round Rock's tax base, and if, like, the 0.36 gets them the same amount of dollars or an equal amount of dollars, what that actually looks like. I don't know if you guys have an appreciation or understanding for, does Taylor need to be high because their tax base is
We can certainly get our
small?
hands on it, but yeah, I don't have it in front of me.
Because I mean, I'm assuming at some point in time we were kind of more middle of the road, but I'm assuming Round Rock and Cedar Park are making substantial investments, as you mentioned, into their infrastructure as well. And I don't know if they were at one point at like 0.32 or 0.31, and now they're only going up to 0.36, and just trying to get a better appreciation for where we sit and
Yeah.
why.
I mean, I think being able to say that they're all going up to their voter approval rate, they're basically going up to the maximum that they can by law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting though. I mean, they're kind of on the tail end of their growth cycle, whereas like we're still coming up and they're coming down. Right? They're more fully built out than we are. But even like there's so many nuances to it, just like the cost of building a wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
They can hit bedrock in a third of the distance as for us. Like we have to bore down 80 meters or something to hit bedrock, whereas they're just like 20 feet and they hit bedrock. Like, so just the cost of like, there's so much
Construction.
variation to like as we start digging into like utility rates, like, you know, trying for us to try to get a handle, because we ask these same questions of like what's, you know, so just the geography can have an impact on that sort of thing.
Just a distance of a couple feet.
Yeah, they also they rely heavily on sales tax. So Round Rock, for example, is sports capital of Texas, and so their sales tax revenue compared to us is different.
Sure.
And I think, don't they earmark
They
a portion
actually
of theirs?
buy down a little
They
bit
use
of
a
their
portion of
property
their sales tax to buy down tax rates. So they're in a different position
I
with
do
their
know that.
sales tax than we are,
Yeah.
just because they're more tourism and that sort of stuff. So bedroom communities, you know, I mean, they're like Friendswood in Houston, for example, is almost entirely residential, very little commercial, and so you're not going to see. It's going to look different than someone on the other end, like a South Padre or something that's more like hot tax and sales tax sort of thing.
I don't know if I had any other questions.
No, it sounds like y'all in a good place as far as just assessing what you're up against and just dealing with it as best you can. Not the easiest thing, obviously. So, looks good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's complicated. It's very complicated math, but you guys do a credible job. You guys do a credible job, and you guys have a great team. And I know in business, I always do my analysis with the strengths and the weaknesses, and I really think you guys really did a great job at understanding the strengths, the worst case scenarios, and the reservation points. And, it's complicated, and the average person that just may see just the numbers, it's like,
Right.
why is that going up 1 point? It's a bigger picture than that, so,
We tried to be transparent in the document, so I would love your feedback on the document as far as you're going through it, things that we could improve on, or things you feel like we didn't include that would be helpful to include, so that feedback is helpful.
Indeed.
And council does value your recommendation and seeks your recommendation on this. So if you felt so inclined to vote and recommend approval of the budget as is, or with any other qualifications that you like, maybe adding 20 pickleball courts, for example, we could try to accommodate that.
Do that now.
But you could propose, you could kind of make a motion and recommend approval as is, or if you want to add some qualifications to that, you can certainly do that. But they do value your input and recommendation on that.
I have a question. I don't know if it's based on anything at all, but with the it feels like the rising temperatures outside, and knowing that we're proud of our parks and trails, what challenges do y'all foresee there?
So
If any.
I would say that all of our parks will be shaded. I think with the FY25 budget, we'll be able to say that all of our parks are shaded. So there's been a significant investment over the last maybe 5 years, a really concerted effort towards shading all the playgrounds to try to extend the life of those facilities and just make them more pleasant to use. We're building a new rec center, so that'll bring a lot of indoor court space, 8 full-size courts. Massive space for people to enjoy inside. But yeah, and trees. Like we're planting trees like crazy. We get grants for trees. Received one recently. We're starting a tree farm of our own to start growing our own and expanding that. So heavy emphasis on shade, whether that's our natural tree canopy or shading our parks, and then building that facility for people to recreate. But yeah, it's hot. It's hot.
So
Yeah.
tomorrow is supposed to trickle down, so we're gonna get back to the high 90s.
Yeah.
It's
Back
what
to the
it
double
is.
digits. Yeah.
It might break the record today, they say.
Wow.
Yeah. Question, team. With the water and waste, the rate adjustments in the water and waste water expenditures, do we have a comparison with other cities local like San Marcos and Georgetowns and the Cedar Parks?
We did. We presented the rates in detail at a July work session, and so I can provide you with those slides and share that information. It did have some benchmarking in there.
Yeah, I would think so. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you'll see a similar story. You'll be able to tell who's been investing recently and who hasn't based on their rates.
Yeah.
Who's been built out for a while, who's starting to invest.
Yeah.
Were there some savings realized just because they might have got going sooner as well? Like I know you touched on one of the things
Even
being
the geography.
Yeah,
right?
the geography
The
part that
cost
you
of
touched
building
on.
facilities. If we'd have built these facilities in 2019, it'd have been about half as much. And
Sure.
So it's like interest rates, timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who could have foreseen a global pandemic and then
It's interesting. I mean, I worked for a city previously that they built their wastewater treatment plant to serve the full build out of the city when they were like 10% built out.
oh, really?
Super unpopular at the time,
Sure.
right? Why are you overbuilding this facility? We're spending $20 million on this facility. Well, that would be a $250 million facility now. So in hindsight, that was the smartest thing they ever did. In the moment, super unpopular politically because you were overbuilding, right? But the cost of doing business is not going down. So it's planting a tree now, right? If that's the best time, is what you're seeing with us now. Like the time is now to invest on that long-term infrastructure. It's not getting cheaper to do business.
Well, if it's needed, are we ready to make a proposal? Yeah, I'll definitely make a motion to recommend the proposed budget 2025. How does the team feel about it? I did extensive research on every additive in these documents already. And can we get a
Yeah, it's second. Yeah.
There we go.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Hi.
All eyes has an order.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Any other questions you have? You have this?
I guess I had one question as it relates. Was it a 3% adjustment for salary or enhancements? Is that just across the board, or is there kind of a blending based on tenure, based on performance?
That is
So-
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the COLA, so that's the cost of living. So
Just the cost,
it is.
and it's
3%
just the cost of living.
all.
There's no additional over and above.
Yeah, that's kind of been that falls under my purview
Sure.
with people and culture, our HR department.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild. Like I get the pleasure of meeting regularly with my peers in other cities and kind of talking about it. And what's interesting is that you'll do these market studies and you'll get information. You'll say you're in the city of Devon and you say you pay this. You say the range is from 60 to 80, but then I pull your information. You're paying them 95, right? So like everybody is just like doing what they can to hold on to certain positions, and so what we've had to do, and we spent every bit of 12 months getting data, analyzing it, looking at not only their pay ranges but their actuals. Like, what are you actually paying that person in that range?
Yeah.
And trying to true it up with ours, but it's a battle out there to try to retain talent. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this area with all the tech and all the, very competitive jobs.
Very competitive.
So,
Yeah, I guess as a person that went from state and local government to the private sector, I experienced a number of years where we didn't get a cost of living as well. So like even cost of living is good, but you obviously want to incentivize folks to do a great job. And I'm not saying people aren't, because I see everybody in the parks department fighting wherever else doing a great job, and you all just being here and walking us through these documents is valuable. So that's just one concern I had, was just around like the 3% enough and
Yeah.
that type of thing.
I would say that we are truing up all the time.
Right.
So like as positions turn over and we're adding new people to the team and we're seeing what the market is really commanding as people are applying, we're truing up the whole team. So like if someone leaves, we have to bring this person on, they're $3,000 higher than all their other peers. We try to we'll do another quick thing like, hey, what's everybody paying still? And then if it makes sense, trying to elevate the team around them to stay competitive. So it's daily. It's a daily practice for us.
Awesome.
I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is getting the minimum pay for police officers to 70.
Yeah,
That was really cool.
Wow,
That was big.
I didn't know they was making that low. Wow. Jesus. Yeah.
Well, if there's no other questions,
make a
No
motion.
questions.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, indeed. And I second that.
right.
Yeah, it'd be good.
all in favor?
All right.
I think
Aye.
you deserve a picture. I need a picture for my
Let's do it. Let's
LinkedIn,
document
too,
it.
I need a
There's
picture.
still time for y'all to eat before you go back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. You got somebody take a picture?
Grab your food.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.